and gentlemen. Welcome to the Mind Your Buffalo podcast. This is your host Ravikant, aka the Buffalo Intellectual. It's been a while since we've spoken. Lots of very interesting things happening in the world, as always. And I've been trying to keep up with all the news, mostly putting out stuff on the Patreon. That's right, because I'm selling out. I want some money. I want paisa. I want rokda. So if you like the show and if you want to keep hearing like one episode on a topical thing of the day or a week every 10-15 days or something like that, drop some money. For all of you who don't have the money, well, I will keep doing the free show. Um, but it might not be very regular. And one of the big things is one of the big reasons why I'm doing less of the free shows is yes, one is the money, but it's not just the money. I joke about it, but it's also the fact that these are now on video. Video adds an extra layer of complication for me, and that I'm always worried about like the audio video syncing. Like I keep trying to do these different systems. It's just very complicated. I don't know. At some point, like I'm planning a bunch of changes over the new year, right? I'm gonna be a different man. I'm gonna be a different kind of person. My cat is screaming. She's had enough of my shit. She's like, this guy keeps saying shit, but no. I'm planning different things. I might do a slightly more professional setup. Maybe like hire somebody for sound audio processing and things of that nature because it's becoming a little difficult with my full-time job. I'm also uh, um, like planning to change the format of the show because right now the what's started happening in the last few months is that the recorded show, the Patreon show and the live show have started diverging in the Patreon, like because it's a closer audience, it's a paid audience, it's behind a paywall. I feel a lot more free, so I can talk with a lot more directness. And in the open YouTube, I'm always worried that like something I'll say in the episode and see, I'm not worried about the regular audience because they kind of hear me, they've seen the work and so on and so forth. So it's always nice to kind of speak to that. But like um, when you're doing this kind of like work, I was just explaining this to a friend recently that I don't want to be too famous. You get what I'm saying? Because that has a very different network algorithm. Because when something catches up, like becomes very topical, when people start sharing it, like you might be listening to me regularly, and you'll be like, "Oh, this is really cool," and you share it to somebody, and like this is the first time they're hearing me, or they don't really know where I'm coming from, and they tend to have like a backlash. So like it just tends to explode, and because like this is not my full-time thing, it tends to have complications. So which is why I'm like always worried about what I'm saying in the main podcast and the editing and all of those things. So it's just simpler to me. The Patreon episode, the YouTube paid member tier, whatever you want to call it, that still feels like the old days of this podcast, where old days. Actually, I can say old days. In January next month, this podcast will be completing 2 years. I didn't realize that. It will be actually completing 2 years. I think I don't remember the exact date. I should look it up. Um, I think I started it in sometime in January a couple of years ago. Oh, that's an interesting one. Well, so it's been 2 years, and in the earlier, it's it's officially enough time for me to say the old days of the podcast. In the old days of the podcast, it was an audio only thing. I would not even put it up on YouTube. I would just like plug it and like speak and like post it on Spotify or something like that. And so that is what I really like because that's very useful to me. But it's also been a journey. Why did I start saying this? Yeah, I started saying this because I'm trying to change. I'll be changing the format of the podcast a little bit. I want to get a lot more guests on because I'm already giving a lot of my takes and things of that nature in the subscribed in the paid tier. So I think like I want to start using this main show to curate like a slightly different kind of conversation with especially people that I whose work I really like. And there's some very cool people whose books and public work and activism and academics and all kinds of interesting things that I kind of want to engage with. So I'll be doing a lot more of that. I'll be doing, like, editorially, I want to shift these two shows a little bit. I'll still be doing my usual rants nonsense. The book will slash should come out sometime in the next few months. It's in the editing process. It's slated roughly to be coming out in the summer. They said now summer can be April also, and summer can be June also. So I don't really know what they have. So I'll wait from them. I'll wait to hear more from them. They asked for some ideas, like, what do you want the cover to be. I think I gave them the idea, what I was thinking, but I'm not sure that they'll go with it because it's just so tacky. It's just so ugly and tacky. And I want that. I don't want like a cool looking kind of a intellectual book. I want like a tacky book. I want like a book that you like, if you put it on your bookshelf, like it doesn't sit nicely in color and tonality with the other books. Like, and that's what it is, because that's what Meet the Savarnas should be. It should not be an aesthetic looking book. Uh, in that sense, it should have the aesthetic of an Ambani wedding. It should be loud, tacky, like too much opulence. Like too little self awareness. That's what it should be. So I hope they go with my design idea or something like that, because I'm not a designer. I'm not an artist. I obviously can't, like, do justice to these sort of things, but like hopefully they'll get my drift and they'll try to make something out of it. Anyway, so that's all about like the things and the shows and everything. But like, I just thought I'll give a little bit of an update, because like I haven't put an episode out in a month. Usually I try to do two of these a month, but like it's just not there. So I think the last episode I put out, if I'm not mistaken, was the Diwali one. I could be wrong. The public episode, the main episode, was Diwali one, which was a while ago. Diwali's been gone. We are almost at the doorstep of Christmas, so it's jumped a whole cycle, in that sense. So the Diwali episode, like, kind of everybody, a lot of people liked. I was surprised. I thought I'll get a lot of hate for it, but I didn't. A lot of people genuinely liked it. They were like, "Yeah, oh my god, this is so real," and so on and so forth, which is very surprising for me, because if I had said this same thing a couple of years ago, right, when the in the early days of the podcast, if I had done it back then, uh, definitely there would have been backlash against it, and the backlash would have been fundamentally because, mm, there was like it would have been like, why are you being a hater, everything, because they were like, oh, this is so wholesome and it's a family thing, and yeah, lights are pretty and that is pretty, and some of it is still there, but I think something has fundamentally changed in culture, and which is what I want to kind of talk about. We are entering a, or actually we are not entering, we have entered a much, I think, a darker era. We've entered like something which is far more cold and black and without values, because I think something major has shifted, not just in India but globally also. Like, this period between, I think it started in the west, because I've done an episode on some time ago, in which I predicted that Donald Trump's going to come back, and then for a while the American media made us kind of believe that it was going to be a closely fought election, and I was very surprised. I don't follow American elections that deeply, but I was almost certain it was not going to be a close election, and it didn't turn out to be. He won in a major landslide. So once again, I like, in my own, like, completely unscientific electoral predictions, I'm completely right. Again, I don't do electoral predictions. I read culture. I try to read culture, and culture is usually a good index of measuring how and where people are thinking. And um, And it seemed to me in the US, and a lot of US culture sets the tone amongst the elites in India, the savarna elites in India, which is why we are starting by discussing by the US popular culture. And it seemed that somewhere in US culture something had shifted, because I think it was during the Obama years, which itself, like the Obamification of the US politics was itself a response to the George W. Bush era of, wars and empires at, like, preemptive wars and empire at all cost. The Americans invaded Afghanistan, they invaded Iraq, and initially when they started, like, it was a post 9/11 great patriotic surge in the US. But by the time they went back to Iraq, for the second Gulf War, and the rising costs of those wars, I think it became very clear within the US, like somewhere there was a fatigue with that. And in Obama, they found like this once a generation kind of a political talent, because he's a black guy, charismatic, very smart. And in that sense, he comes to power, the first Obama presidency, comes to power on the back of an incredibly electrifying sort of a election campaign, which talked about hope and which talked about building a better world. Of course, 8 years of Obama, like no better world was built. He went and bombed 11 countries. Like a lot of, in the American inner cities, like, black youth and black welfare programs got defunded. Homelessness and the healthcare crisis in the US has intensified. All manners of fun things happened. But it was largely during the Obama presidency where the idea that politics could be performative. It didn't actually need to deliver. It could be performative. Like, if you said the right things in the right way, like that was enough. And I think somewhere that kind of filtered down into culture where everybody started, like, it began this whole exercise of what now people call SJW, social justice warriors, woke, and all of these. This comes, I think, from there. Again, like everything I'm saying is not definitive. I'm just an idiot. I'm ranting, right? But I think that's where it sort of comes from, and it enters culture. And so what tends to happen after that is once it enters culture, then the whole conversation becomes about, oh, representation and things of that nature. And a lot of it was needed, is very needed. So they started, like, making a push for strong female characters and like queer inclusivity, and body positivity and trans inclusion and racial justice, and all these themes started catching up, uh, almost to becoming like this new paradigm where, the only way to kind of do justice was to create this as a social inclusion. But you could let public policy and social institutions collapse. So you say the right things and make activism individual oriented by creating these performances which had to be individually done, and which were sort of policed. Like, if you don't do it, you call this person out, that person out. So everything is at a very individual basis. Like, we police each other, we police ourselves, and that's sort of social justice. But social justice stopped me, like, while we are policing each other and ourselves, we let social institutions rot. And this was great for, I think, global capitalism. This was great for the political class in the US, because they just like went forth and they started, like, it was like business as usual in Washington. Big pharma lobbying, big capital lobbying, everything as usual, as long as you did the correct, vocabulary with the correct thing. And what that culture kind of translated over in India was also very interesting, because around 2012, 13, you start seeing this elite Savarna, culture starting to mimic and reproduce the kind of impulses that were already taking shape in the US. Because let's face it, I've said this before, everything about elite Savarna culture is just like a tacky knockoff, discount ripped off version from the US. So like that's the time when you suddenly started seeing these English speaking, virtue signaling comedians emerge, and spoken poetry. Don't like my God, there's a spoken poetry circle of 2012, 13, 14, 15. That was insufferable actually. Everybody is speaking their truth. Everything is about acknowledging and hearing. And again, I don't mean to sound like I'm dismissing this. I am dismissing some of it to be true, and I did even back then. Like some of my friends from that era, like I used to like they used to look at me funny because I was like, "What is this? Like, what is this going on?" Like you go to a South Bombay, Lower Parel kind of like a venue, and like somebody is doing like a very good friend of mine. She is a spoken poet, so like I'd gone to listen to her, and that's truly when it was supposed to be her last performance in India at that time. I don't know if she did another one because she was going away abroad for a while. So I think I'd gone for that show, and I was just seeing the other people at the thing. Like she was fine, she's OG, but like I was seeing the other people, and like the way they were talking, and like the venue and the whole place, and it was a very strange vibe, like 600 rupee beer glasses, and people are there, and somebody is saying that, oh, we are collecting sanitary pads to give to underprivileged women, and like there were like some 10 whisper packets on a table while you're doing this event, and everything is about like some kind of like, oh, I suffered this and I did this. And I was just like listening to I felt very strange. I didn't have the vocabulary to understand what it was, but I felt like maybe I'm the only one in the room who's not completely with it, because this feels dumb. This whole thing just feels very weird. It's got a very weird energy to it. And that circle slowly sort of morphed and died and evolved and got like eventually all of those stand up comedy and spoken poetry and like all of those worlds just sort of got like mashed together, and like you started seeing more of that energy in Bollywood, and like elite Savarna Bollywood was trying to create like these sort of stories, and you started seeing that in the civil society, NGOs. You started seeing that energy on elite college campuses. It became a very strange thing, and that was a time when Modi is rising politically. He's like 2014, like in 2014. Modi, by the way, people forget this. Modi was not the original plan for 2014 for BJP. Like there was a bit of a power vacuum. UPA was on its way out. It had been destabilized thanks to all of those scams and all of the India against corruption movement, but which, by the way, itself turned out to be so fantastic. India against corruption, that whole movement from which Kejriwal arose. Back then, they used to be like, oh, this is not a political movement. Almost everyone who was part of the India against corruption lineup has ended up in the BJP, right? Or been or aligned with BJP. Everybody from Kiran Bedi to Sri Ravi Shankar and Ramdev, obviously, except Kejriwal, who ended up creating his own political formation, the Aam Aadmi Party, eventually getting rid of the people like Prashant Bhushan and Yogendra Yadav, which personally, um, that's very interesting to me, because like these are also like these great Prashant Bhushan and all, like they're very highly respected in Savarna circles also. So you saw that energy taking place. But anyways, I'm getting distracted. The point is, India against corruption, around that period, 2012, 2013, like it was clear that it had dented the legitimacy of the Congress and UPA regime in a way that it took I don't think Congress has fully recovered from there, but at least it's now seen different from it. But like for the next 4 5 years, you couldn't see Congress as different from that. That's how badly those protests had dented its legacy. But there was no clear face within the BJP to be able to like sort of capitalize on that. And Modi was still seen as a bit of a wild card from Gujarat. It was, I think, very late in the day, if I'm not mistaken. It was the Goa convention of the BJP. Somebody's gonna be like, no, actually, no, whatever it was. Like it was very late in the day, like when Modi gets the go ahead. Okay, fine, we're gonna back this guy. This he will be our guy. And before that, he had been quietly building his PR very strongly. The whole Gujarat model of governance, like for like 4 5 years, like because he was trying to get past that whole um, Godhra imagery that had initially secured him the Gujarat job. So he was trying to be a development guy. He was doing all these corporate events. He was Vibrant Gujarat Summit. He was the pro development guy. And our good friend of the show, Ratan Tata, among the very first people who endorsed him. I did an episode honoring the fantastic legacy of Ratan Tata in cementing Modi. I did an episode of it for the Patreon and the YouTube paid tiers, and I lost subscribers because of that. So thank you. It was so nice for me to realize that there are people who listen to my show enough, okay, to drop money and listen to my special episodes that I put out for them. And they heard this episode about Ratan Tata and they're like, fuck you. No, I won't give you my money. Great. Please keep your money. Please give it to, a charity of the Tatas. I'm sure they will put good use to it. Great man, Ratan Tata. Beautiful. What a beautiful soul. Uh, and but yeah, like he was one of the first people who endorsed Modi, and along with many industrialists thereafter. So I think 2013-14 Modi is just rising. Like he peaks with the election where he wins with the now so-called Modi wave, and this elite savarna group which was seeing that political performance of social justice, like that's the time where comedy in India, for instance, suddenly became political. Before that, comedians were not trying to be political. They were trying to be sort of funny, but like in a very Seinfeld type of observational humor funny, because that was what they were seeing on Saturday Night Live. Because like I said, everything is a reproduction of the West. By West I mean the Americans. Everything is a reproduction of American popular culture. So they were like trying to be very that time the dominant paradigm previously before that in American comedy was like observational humor, like, oh, look at this bottle of shampoo and why does it have so many ingredients? Ha ha ha, like that kind of a thing. I just bought a donut. Why did I have to get like a long slip of a bill, which runs into 2 pages? Like, why can't I do like that kind of observational daily slice of life humor? And that's what most of these idiots were doing in India till that period in 2012, 13, 14, when they suddenly became political, right? And in Modi, initially they thought that like, oh, this will be like a good fight and all that. Then they realized like, this is not a regime that you play nice with. Like this is not the UPA. This is not like, you can't embarrass this regime by doing a mela on Ramlila ground. Like this is a different thing. And it helped that they had their own troll armies. And these troll armies went on social media, Twitter especially, and like carpet bombed the crap out of anybody who tried to disagree with them. And it created a very very interesting kind of a setup where a lot of the elites sort of, one section of them went into this full-fledged, oh, I'm in war mode, and another section just kind of completely retreated onto themselves from political themes. And that was where elite savarna schizophrenia sort of like started taking root, in my opinion. And this just kept going on and on. And somewhere in the middle of it there was this the section of elite savarnas which sort of retreated into Instagram, which used to be a lot more of an exclusive platform back then, right? Initially, now we are seeing a Facebookizing of Instagram. By that I mean like Instagram's becoming quite mass, but back then, even in 2017 ish, 2018 ish, like people were beginning to not have Facebook. Till 2015, 16, I think Facebook was the primary social media for a lot of elites, and then like a lot of them started like shifting away from it and started going like Instagram became like they had a Facebook account and an Instagram account. Eventually, they got rid of the Facebook account altogether, and they were primarily on Insta. Uh, and if you were Gen Z, you were on Snapchat and things of that nature. So around that point in time, once they kind of stepped away from Twitter and Facebook, there was also this celebration of whimsy, like whimsy, fun, like this sort of a retreat into a eternal childhood. You know, like I would see, I still see, okay, grown as 30, 35 year old people saying, like, oh, life's too hard. Uh, I'm too tired to adult today. What do you mean by that? You're not adulting. Like I've made this point in some of the earlier episodes. Like our generation, and I'm saying mine. I'm not even going into the Gen Z. My generation, like we grew up. We are a generation which benefited from market reforms. So we had a childhood, like we have a memory of pre-cable TV, pre-malls, pre-McDonald's, pre-cafes, pre-CCD, Cafe Coffee Day, Barista, Starbucks. We have a memory of that India because we were children in that India. And then we kind of like grew up with malls and fashion and careers which gave us money. Like if you were lucky enough or privileged enough or both to kind of like have done an engineering or an MBA in early 2000s or mid 2000s, then you were set up for a career where you had like huge consumable income. And like somewhere after 2010, this section started becoming like more like children, like this eternal childhood. Like I would go into like MBA home, like people who are like 5 years working in the industry, 6 years working in the industry. I'm talking 2013, 2014, getting like 1.5 lakh, 2 lakh rupees salary, and unke ghar mein, like you go, there are only these like there's no bed, like you're living like animals. Like you go to the house and like there's one gadda, there's one mattress on the floor, and like there are all these cool ashtrays, like skull ashtrays there, right? Like one ashtray is like a commode, like a toilet commode, and like there is an Iron Man mask, and there is a Captain America shield, and like they have like very beautiful themed coasters, coasters on which you put a glass on, but they don't have a bed. It's like I'm sure if you're from that era, you've seen a house like this, you've probably lived in a house like this, right? Your friends like this. And that is such an incredible image to me, because like you are curating an aesthetic in your living space. There will be fairy lights in the house, like the ones that I've put up in my room now. I'm trying to make my set pretty. So yeah, like there'll be fairy lights, there'll be pink fairy lights, there'll be posters of, I don't know, Scarface movies, like Hollywood movies like Scarface, and there'll be like Jim Morrison posters and things of that nature, Jimi Hendrix, and there's no bed, and there's no proper crockery. Plateं nahi kharidi hai, right? Like people are still eating from like some plastic plates, or like there are takeaway boxes around the house. Like you're grown as adults in your 30s and you haven't invested in crockery, and you're making money, you're making a lot of money, लेकिन आप बर्तन नहीं खरीद सकते हो. You can't like get food. Even if you're ordering takeout, you take the food, you put it like in a bowl, you have a plate, you sit down, like not like animals, like you're just eating it, right? But that's what that was, right? And if you tried saying anything to people back then, they'd be like, oh, I can't adult, it's so hard, it's so hard to adult. It's what is that? What is that? What was that thing? Like, oh, I can't do taxes. I can't, like, I can't go to work. Oh no, I have to work so hard. Like, it just created this very soft culture of constantly indulging people and validating each other's. Like, nobody was going around telling, hey, can you shut up and just do it? Like, do it. It's hard. I know it's hard. A lot of this stuff is hard. Okay, it's difficult. That's why it's called life, like something like that, right? And this is what I mean. Like, I even as I'm saying these words, I can almost imagine some section of the audience feeling like, what the hell is this? What the hell is this? Do you know how hard I have to struggle? Yes, we all know. And there is a space for, like, support, empathy, compassion, and just like giving somebody a hug and saying, like, I know it's tough, right? Like, let's see this through, or whatever, something like that. But that space is not 24/7. That space is not there 7 days a week, 12 months a year, 365 days a year. That's not a constant, right? Like, this got normalized that you only were supposed to get understanding and empathy, and never like any kind of personal accountability. But accountability is constantly being sought from society or public figures. It's a very strange sort of a system. Like, you couldn't, like people would be like, don't use words like, dumb. It is ableist. I mean, I used to, I still find it a little strange that, okay, yes, I do understand the fact, and I'm a communications trained guy. I do understand that language has, like, words are very important, and language has very important dimensions to it. And I also understand that if you are sort of like saying words like dumb, and somebody is speech impaired or has like an issue, like, it might not sit well with some of them. I get that element of it. But not everybody who is speech impaired or like with that kind of a situation feels like that. It's also not the word often, because this is again a language thing. It's the context. It's how I say it. Like, am I saying it to be mean? Am I using the word for some other purpose, right? It's what a lot of white comedians would say, like, hey, I should be able to, allowed to, say the n word, or I used to I should be allowed to make rape jokes because it's not the joke, it's the context. I get it. And which is why this is such a difficult topic, because there is no easy answer to this. There is no right or wrong. What I'm saying has implications on both sides. That yes, these like using, like in the context of white comedians, using the n word is problematic, except there are contexts in which you can also, like in the way you speak, and like expert comics, including black comics and white comics, routinely kind of, flirt with that line. Bad comics get called out all the time. Similarly with, like, jokes on sexual assault. Like, I understand that it's very traumatic. I personally, like, even like, I get the argument, but I'm just 100% uncomfortable with it. Like, I'll never make I don't make, I will not make uh, uh, sexual assault jokes. I've had too many people in my life who've um, like who I've seen, on the on the side of it. So I get it, but that's my personal discomfort. But at the same time, I understand the context that it it's not just the word, like it's not in its absoluteness, but I don't want to be in this position where I want to defend like some Samayana type of idiot. I don't want to do that. But I also don't want to universalize this. So it's a very uneasy feeling because you're on both sides of it, right? You're on all sides of it. And we went through this period in culture where everybody was like, oh, there are no both sides. There is nothing. Like there is no sitting on the fence. Like either you get it or you don't get it, right? Either you're a misogynist or you're an ally. Either you're a racist or you're, an ally. Or either you're, queer inclusive or caste ally, caste inclusive, or you're, the problem. And you know like it just became this very pick a side kind of a moment in culture, and it had like this virtual lynch mob energy. And I've said this before, I was as much a part of it. Like I'm commenting on it in a historical sense, but I'm very much a part of it, um, because I was also like, around 2020, like going through stuff myself. I was kind of trying to find my own feet in the whole thing. I was going through my own identity, like the crisis of my own identity, my job, my public persona, like all of that sort of came together. Buffalo Intellectual was born. So initially, like I was like very aggressive, like, what did this guy say and what did that? And a lot of my early posts, and which are now like, I kind of removed them because like it's just so weird, because a lot of them had this instructional energy. Like, did you know this is what caste is? And did you know this is, because a lot of it is like I'm finding out stuff and I'm like screaming out into the ether. And a lot of it also had this aggressive energy of, oh, if you don't do this, then you're wrong. And if you don't, because I was in that zone. But like, you do it once, you do it 10 times, you do it 15 times. When you do it 27 times, then you're like, okay, okay, I get it now. Because it's like, I'll give you an example. It's like an issue that I feel very passionately about: student suicides in higher institutions of learning in India. Like higher education institutions and casteism that our students have to face is something that I feel very deeply about as a first generation learner myself, as well as someone who um, someone who is a teacher himself. So I see a lot of kids, a lot of young people come from marginalized backgrounds, marginalized caste backgrounds, deprived backgrounds, uh, go into these institutions of higher learning, struggle there, deeply, deeply struggle there. Because of the way they dress, way they speak English, and they're constantly judged, and all of those things. And I feel very, very personally about all of those things. And every time there's a student suicide, like in one of these elite institutions like the IITs, or like, it tears me apart. Like it just bothers me every time I hear one of our SCST OBC students tell me a story about like casual casteism in their class, in their course, the way their teachers talk, where their classmates talk, relative grading, things of that nature. Relative grading, by that I mean, a lot of times, like, teachers will just like not pass our students or give them terrible marks and things of that nature. These things are so rampant. They're so rampant. They're so universal. Study after study, every decent study has confirmed it. News media has written on it, yet nothing changes. So like the first, like, like this happened to me last year itself, like student suicide in IIT Madras. I'm like angry, I'm furious, I'm tweeting about it, I'm writing about it. newspaper officers are calling me up saying we want a court, and I'm like, casteism is there and this, and 3 weeks later, another suicide in another IIT. Again, I'm very angry and I'm tweeting, and like, again, after another 3 weeks, another student suicide. I'm like, what the hell is going on? Again, the same kind of newspaper people are calling me up and saying, we want a quote from you. I'm like, okay, um, do you think is there casteism on campus? I was like, dude, I was asked the same question 1.5 months ago. There have been two suicides since then. How come I'm getting asked the same question over and over again? And like then 2 weeks again, 3 weeks again, another suicide, and then another, and then another, and then another. Eventually, I had to just tell a journalist that it just feels like now I am building my name out of somebody's death, because every time somebody dies, you guys call me. So it feels like somebody's death is my way of putting my name out there, right? And I don't want to do that. Also, how long will you write the same story? Is there casteism in the IIT? Like, when will your story change to, oh, there is casteism here. What are we doing about it, right? Casteism is not just the caste of the dead student. It is also about like the culture of education. So student need not be necessarily from an SC/ST OBC background. It is this whole guru shishya, this toxic culture of stressing students out, this toxic Brahminical idea of treating education like an Agni Pariksha. It's bad pedagogy, it's bad teaching style. But nay, it has to be Agni Pariksha. I will give you an exam that is designed to fail you. Dum hai to pass karke dikhao. You have to do pratigya, you have to do like tapasya. Education is not a tapasya. Education is not a is not, I keep saying, it's not a MTV Roadies challenge. Education is a process of discovering yourself. It's an enlightenment journey. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be discovery oriented. It's not supposed to be, like a battle. It's not supposed to be a war, right? And a lot of that ethos and culture of the Indian education system comes from caste, comes from the ideas of Brahminism, which are imposed on all students. And of course, SCST, OBC, marginalized caste students tend to suffer the most in this, right? So when will the news story ask this question rather than be like, oh, is there casteism in IIT? Like, how long do we have to keep doing this? And then another 2 weeks later, there's another suicide, and then there's another suicide. After a while, I don't want to go on Twitter and say, like, guys, another dead. Then I'm just going to be like, fuck it, man. Fuck it. I'm like, I started tweeting at the education minister and like, when will HRD ministry look at this? When will education minister note this? When will Supreme Court like take suo moto cognizance of this? Like, why is nobody losing their jobs? Why are heads not rolling because of this? Why is the parliament not like being brought to a standstill over this, right? Because this is a very big issue. Education is a youth issue. Everyone can get behind this. Like, why is nobody literally talking about this, right, in a meaningful way, with the urgency and the scale? Same way with overseas education scholarships. Our students, SCST, OBC students, they don't get scholarships. They go abroad. Money is tight. It's horrible. It's just like I'm again working myself up into a frenzy. But the point is, the first time you hear it, and like after a while, you're like, fuck it, I can't say anything. I can't keep the same tone. And like after the 23rd death, when I go and say like, the system is broken, some idiot, some bugger will come and like post like, if you have merit, then you can survive. The first time there was a campus death, and I write this and you write that, I can respond to it. The fifth time there's a death, and the fifth time I've posted this, and again somebody new comes and says, if you had merit, I can maybe still respond to it. But the 27th time this happens, and I'm like, oh God, I can't start the conversation from zero. And you step out of it. My whole point in telling you this through the example of campus suicides is, you know, the same thing has sort of also happened with a lot of people. Like, you just replace the variable from campus suicides to transphobia to all sorts of issues about mental health. And like, you start the first time something happens, you're like, oh my god, this is not it. Fifth time, 27th time, you're like, oh god, I can't do this again. I can't do this again because the scale of this is too big. When you make social justice individual, then the individual has to constantly respond and educate and do the labor of creating a narrative. And the individual is a finite thing, is a limited thing. An individual is just a person. You get eroded, you get exhausted, you can't keep doing it. So you just like fall off the wagon, you just get off it. And more people in the last few years have sort of dropped off this. And the only people who are still on it are like, you know, are like are like insane, right? Are like, you just have to look at them and be like, what are you trying to achieve right now? What is actually going on? Like, you're still doing this, you're still going. And by the way, there's nothing noble about this. Like, recently I was on Anurag minus Verma's podcast, and we were kind of joking around about this. Like, the BJP IT cell guy is gonna write what the BJP IT cell has decided that day, right? It's their job. They've been doing it for 12 years. They're going to come out and say, like, I don't know, Hindu khatre mein hai. It's what they decided. तुम जाके उसको नई information नहीं दे सकते हो. He's not going to suddenly be like, oh yeah, that is new facts have emerged in this. I must reconsider. That's not what's going to happen. Even if he feels that, oh, this whole mandir thing and all, mandir polarization, Hindu khatre mein, is not really giving us the kind of electoral dividends that it used to. The Lok Sabha elections was a wake up call. If I'm speaking from the point of view of a BJP guy, like, I'm trying to. So they'll be like, okay, but like, we are winning. We won in Maharashtra thanks to this welfare schemes. And like, I think that's what we really should be talking about. Even if as a BJP worker, let's say I am one, I'm talking like that. I'm not going to agree with these points on Twitter, because that's not what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to be on Twitter to do a certain kind of a job. So it doesn't matter if you're going to come and say, but this, like, what do you expect? Like, these seasoned BJP IT cell, these people to kind of go like, oh, new facts have come to light, now I change my opinion. That's not gonna happen. You tried it 100 times before. What makes you think that now it's like you're pitching a gotcha moment. You're pitching a, I'll do the perfect argument and they will see reason. You have to be an idiot, or you have to be an addict to keep doing this, right? You have to be an addict. You're addicted to this. You're not really committed to making the other person understand the sense, but you're addicted to this argument. That is a form of illness. I'm imagining there is a pathology somewhere, because it can't be sensible, it can't be reasonable, and you're involved in that cycle. So there's one section of the elite savarnas which took that performative social justice, and like, a lot of people kind of fell off the wagon because they got exhausted by this. And the ones who are still continuing this, they're like, something's wrong there, right? And the other section of elite savarnas who kind of earlier on retreated into this world where from influencers were born, and like, who were in 2017, 18, 19 already curating, like, they were in their nice little cutesy rooms with fairy lights and ukulele, and like listening to Pratik Kuhad, and like they were curating a whimsical life. Like, a little magic is needed, little love, little light, little magic. Like, they retreated into this imbecile state. You're like an infant. It's like an infantilization of your own brain. And if you said anything like that, they would get angry because they were like, oh, you're too toxic, you don't get it. positivity is a gift, like, being able to feel some love when you've never felt any love, you're just harsh, and like, community and empathy. And the funny part is, a few years down the line, a lot of people who aggressively spoke like that have ended up turning out to be some very toxic people. Like, nothing puts off people faster than people who talk like that. This idea that I only, make friends with, we have a community of like-minded empaths. Well, I don't mean to make fun of it. I hope you do. And if it works for you, that's very good. Don't feel attacked if I say that for a large majority of people, that hasn't worked out exactly. Because people have instincts of love, affection, compassion, empathy, and wholesomeness, but they don't have the capacity to be that way every day with everybody that they have decided to be that way with. You feel a range of all emotions with all people at all times, like in that sense. So you have to kind of temper that down, and if you're not doing that, then you are making affection a performance. You're making love a performance, just like you make outrage a performance, just like you make everything a performance, while the actual social and cultural institutions around it decay. So you create a world where, of course, a Donald Trump will succeed because, like, he's probably talking straight in a way that some of these politicians and political class, his opponents like Kamala Harris and all, weren't going to talk, because they're not straight talking anymore, right? So I think there is a bigger cultural movement, and what that has meant in India is you're now reaching this stage for the first time, and I'll wrap up with this. This is the first time in um, since I would imagine 2001, 2002. I think it's the first time in 20-25 years that elite savarnas are not relevant to the political, economic, cultural discourse. I think ever since the term development entered the political vocabulary in the late 90s, started by Chandrababu Naidu, um, and eventually that just became like a universal, like elections in India were won and lost by who promised more development and who didn't. Ever since that happened, this section of elite savarnas were like central to the discourse on economics, on politics, on culture and society. The big tech capitalist bros were talking about entrepreneurship, VC, hustle, you know, and the other side was talking about empathy, love, community, and wholesomeness. And somewhere in between were, stand-ups and youth, which was like speaking truth to power. And somewhere in the middle of it was also these people who were being whimsical, magical, and wholesome. Like that whole formation, which starts from the aggressive, ruthless tech bro to the to the magical fairy jungle spirit, like that thing, like that whole spectrum is now suddenly, for the first time in 20-25 years, irrelevant, because I think globally culture has moved on from that point, because it was exhausting and very dysfunctional. I think in India, we have especially moved on. I think because in India, that section of society is so small, is so small. Um, it's fascinating for me. Like, of course, a film like Pushpa is now like you know the number one film which is going around, like in terms of, it's not just a money. Like Bollywood has been very shady in the last 20, or Indian film industry has been very shady in the last 20 years in terms of how it defines success. Like this movie is 1,000 crores, this movie is 800 crores. We don't know what that money is, how much of it is speculation money, how much of it is, deals and future deals, and what's the lifetime. Like, is it 800 crores now, or did you just sign a deal that over the next 20 years they will keep giving you 10 crores for this every time they play the movie, and you expect them to play the movie 30 times, so you get, like, how much of it is a projection and how much of it is actual real money? Because there's no way any film is making 500 crore, 800 crore from gate receipts, because you keep flipping the films every few weeks. The era of one film running for Silver Jubilee, Golden Jubilee, 50 weeks. That era passed away 30 years ago with the death of the single screen theaters. In the multiplex era, that's not what's happening. So it's not screen receipts, it's mostly projection money. So I don't really go by which film is how successful by the number. This just sort of some one of these trade analysts, whatever, like this. I was gonna say Karan Thapar, whatever, like one of these idiots, Rajiv Masan type of jokers will come out and say, "Oh, this film is like 737 crores, 0.55 lakhs." Screw you! Like, none of those numbers mean anything to me. What means is, like, something like Pushpa has entered popular cultural vocabulary across segments, not in the elites. Elites are still going around making fun of it. I was seeing tweets like people saying, "Oh, because of Pushpa, Interstellar is not being released in IMAX." Who gives a shit about Interstellar? Like, the section of society which um, cares more about Interstellar than Pushpa is now, for the first time in 20-25 years, politically, culturally, economically, socially irrelevant to the discourse. I haven't seen Pushpa, but like a friend of mine, like, colleague, he was just describing to me that we were discussing something about work, some business thing, and then he told me this line in Pushpa. He's like, "Oh, this is like Pushpa." It's like, how? He's like, "There's a line in the movie, I think it's the first one, where she's smuggling, I think, sandalwood trees," is how he described it to me. And the guy says, "I'm gonna give you 2 lakh rupees or something like that, 3 lakh rupees per tree." And he says, "I don't want 3 lakh rupees per tree. I want whatever 10%." And the dude is like, "But that's only going to be 2 lakh rupees. You'll make more money if I give you per tree." And he says, "I don't want to make more money. I want to own it. I don't want to work for you. I want to be, I want to own the thing, right?" That's such a powerful, like, I don't know if I, for those of you who've seen the movie, can like sort of leave in the comments or whatever. Oh, see what I did there? Leave in the comments. Like, that's my way of saying that boost traction for this. Um, Interestingly, I'm saying that after the 55th minute mark, assuming you made it this far. But like, if you did, and like put in the comments, I think that's a scene. But like, even if it is not, this is what I like about being a culture studies, popular culture person, like as a scholar. Even if this scene is not there in the movie, or there's a different context, it doesn't matter, because when it comes to cultural vocabulary, facts go out of the window. That's how this guy chooses to remember it, right? And that's how, you know a text like a movie becomes different things for different people. So culture has moved on. Zoe Akhtar, making, or whoever making the Archies and Ori and all of these things, like they're no longer setting the discourse. Discourse has moved on from them. Discourse has gone into a different place. Nobody cares about these elite Savarna influencers from 2019, 2020. Like Prajakta Kohli or what. Like, why are these people famous? Like, they got famous. I don't think there'll be another one like that. Like, they already peaked, and they're over their peak. Like, they're going to go the way like all these MTV VJs of the late 90s were. For old kids, like, my generation people, you'll remember, like, late 90s, all these Nikhil Chinappa and all of them, like, they were supposed to be the coolest people around, and then they just sort of like fell off the map. Like, they haven't fallen off the map. They're doing things like, there's a Cyrus Brocha will pop up here and then and everything. All of these people are still around, but like, they're not at the center of culture anymore. And I think it's the same thing that's gonna happen with all these, Savarna influencers from 2018, 2019. When you could just be pretty, do a little dance, like do a little outfit, and you acquired audiences. Like, brands will still keep giving them some money for a while, but that thing has peaked. This idea of being beautiful, being whimsy, being magical, being cutesy is over. Okay, it's over. This idea that you can be a tech bro, you can be ruthless, you can be this, and you can hustle and start up, that's also over. That whole binary of, like, people saying don't use this word, it is offensive, and on the other side the other group saying, oh, but I will use this word because my freedom of speech. That whole scene on both sides is irrelevant, because, like I was saying in the middle of the episode somewhere, that in reality, in everyday life, in truth, these things are very difficult, they're very complicated, they're like, there's no easy truth to these things. My cat has just come into my lap. Like, I don't know if I can show you or see. I'm finishing a podcast, puppy. Stay here while I. So, like I'm saying, like a lot of these things are very much part of culture, and it's difficult to take a rigid position on things. You can only take contextual position on things. And I think that ambiguity, which was not okay about 2017, 2018, or culture during 2020, 2021, I think that has kind of faded away very quickly. And in India, what that means is this elite savarna group, this English speaking people in big urban cities, IB school educated, in these big universities, a lot of whom went abroad to study, many of whom are still abroad. Your sensibilities are obsolete in India already. You're talking a vocabulary which is no longer the dominant vocabulary here. In fact, it's past. You've aged out. Most of the people have fallen off this wagon. You're remnants of a culture which has moved on from you. You're obsolete. You're dinosaurs. You are fossils. You are young, but you have already become old. You're old news. That's it. That's the podcast. It's the end of the woke culture. Bye bye. Hey, you finished the whole episode. Well done. I can't believe you can tolerate my voice for so long. But in case you liked what you heard, you might consider also joining for the exclusive episode that I do for my paying subscribers, because that show gets into slightly edgier topics and I don't really want to put it out in the public domain. It's available on the Patreon as well as on YouTube through the join option. And in case you don't want to drop extra money, I completely understand. Please keep listening to my regular show. I'm grateful as ever. There's a buy me a coffee link in case you want to drop some love. Otherwise, just have a nice day. Stay being awesome. Bye bye.